This video was made with real research and is based on the dialogue between Joe Rogan and Chamath Palihapitiya. All sources, data, and links used in this video are listed in the description. It took several days of work to produce this video.
It freaks me out, but I've kind of gotten to this place where I'm like, well, it's going to happen.
Did you see this thing? It's the CEO of Verizon, Dan Schulman. He put out this very public forecast. You know, very smart guy, well-regarded in business. And I think he said something like 30% of all white-collar jobs will be gone by 2030. I don't know, Jamie, maybe you can get the exact thing, but it's something like that.
That's probably optimistic.
And I thought, at first my initial reaction was like, this is totally not credible. But then I'm like, hold on a second, that's my bias because I want to believe that that's not possible. Honestly,
right.
You know. And as I've gotten older, I'm a little bit better now. Like, okay, hold on a second, let's weigh the probabilities. And now I was like, man, if I'm going to be fair, maybe there's a 10, 20% chance of that. There's a bunch of other outcomes that are much better than that, but that's part of the set of outcomes that you have to consider. And then I was like, well, what's my antidote to that? And the only thing that I can say is don't worry, it's going to be better. I don't think that that's a good answer.
No.
So there has to be, like, all of this kind of goes back to, look, my wife and I had this conversation where, like, if it were
true, Dan Schulman is Verizon CEO since October 2025. His actual Wall Street Journal warning: AI could push U.S. unemployment to 20–30% within 2 to 5 years. Boston Consulting Group is more moderate. Half of U.S. jobs affected, up to 15% disappearing entirely. Goldman Sachs puts global exposure at 300 million jobs. The direction is real, only the timeline is uncertain.
And as a result, a lot of these leaky bucket problems are getting filled.
So what percentage do you think could be fixed?
I think if I had to be a betting man, I think probably 30 to 40% of the federal budget is leaked out.
Just from shitty code?
No, meaning like all of the rules and like you can take, I'm not saying that there isn't fraud.
Right.
But I think a lot of times what happens is less nefarious than fraud, like meaning like conspiratorial actors.
Right.
I just think it's
incompetence,
inefficiency,
right,
errors.
For sure.
Like, for example, like I saw Doge just say they were able to like expunge like millions of people that were like 150 years old or more.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea how much money those folks were getting or who they were, but it's probably a lot. It's probably not zero. And now that they got rid of it, they're
false. Wildly exaggerated. The Government Accountability Office reports $162 billion in improper payments for fiscal year 2024, just 2.4% of the $6.75 trillion federal budget. Even Gal's highest fraud estimate caps total losses around 8%. Real waste is concentrated. Medicare and Medicaid alone are 50% of all improper payments. Reform should target those programs, not chase a number that's 15 Hoyo the truth.
Look, an $80,000 a year teacher pays 40% tax. But if you're a multi-billionaire, most of your wealth is not W-2 wages. It's cap gains. But there's all kinds of ways to shelter cap gains. There's all kinds of ways to defer. And so even though you pay more on an absolute dollar basis, on a percentage basis, you're paying way, way less. And all of those tricks have been exposed. They've all been exposed. These are all mechanisms that were invented from the 1980s to now, right? By all the banks and all the folks that wanted to come to folks that had wealth, and so it's all known. And I think people are kind of like, hey, hold on a second, this just doesn't feel fair anymore.
Absolutely. But the other problem with that is, if you...
Partially true. The pattern is real. The numbers aren't. An $80,000 single earner pays roughly 25–28% combined, federal G state, not 40%. But the bigger point holds. Capital gains are taxed at 20%, maximum versus 37%, top marginal income, taxed on oil. With borrowing against assets, step-up basis at death, and trusts, the wealthiest pay far less. ProPublica's 2021 leak showed Warren Buffett's true tax rate was about 0.1% over a decade.
And that's like a real mindfuck too, I think.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have a hard time with like being criticized. Doesn't seem to bother him that much as long as he's just being himself. Like,
I think he's like 2 steps ahead. Like there are things like, somebody tweeted yesterday or the day before or something like he controls 2.7% of GDP or something, right? He's got like $800 billion.
it's so crazy.
It's crazy. It's so crazy.
So nuts.
And it was like a comparison to John D. Rockefeller, who controlled something around the same time. And he's the first comment. He's like, 10 trillion or bust. And then, obviously, people lose their mind.
Right.
People just fucking lose their mind.
Right.
On both sides. So this one side is like, think of the abundance and the incredible stuff we're going to get if he can get us to 10 trillion. And other people are like, you can't.
True. Forbes estimated Musk's net worth at $788 in May 2026. U.S. nominal GDP in 2025 was approximately $29 trillion. $788 be $29, UA 2.72%. Almost exactly the cited figure. Historical comparison. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil era peak in 1916 was about 1.5% of US GDP to I. Measured this way, Musk is wealthier as a share of the economy than Rockefeller ever was. The one-third goal refers to his $10 trillion target.
Okay, I have my own thing. My recipe is totally secret. China uses this word called open source, but it's not open source. So they say, here's how I make my thing. You can see it, super transparent. What it is more like open weights, which is like in a recipe, it tells you, you need sugar. You need butter. Well, how much sugar? And they'll say, so much. But then they don't say it's brown sugar. They don't say it's white sugar. So there's all these different ways where they kind of give you this perception that it's completely transparent, but it's somewhat transparent. So just in the level set, nobody in the world has a functional open source model other than maybe NVIDIA, which is any good in the league of the closed source models and the open weight models of the Chinese. Okay, so the Chinese open weight models are great. The closed source models of America are great. And then there's a couple open source, like fully open, that are kind of catching up. The thing between America and China, what I find so fascinating is this.
Partially true. True at the top of the leaderboard. DeepSeek V4 Pro leads Bencham at 87, followed by Kimi K26, Moonshot, GM5, Jipu, and Qn3, Pava.Alibaba. But Chamath glosses over the West. Meta's Llama still has 100 million users. Mistral and Google's Gemma remain credible. NVIDIA's Nematron is competitive, but trails on benchmarks. The strategic point that China leads in the open weight tier is real, and the geopolitical implications are too.
And that's the second part of, I think, what this industry has to do better. I had lunch with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He told this crazy story. I'll tell you. Steve Jobs gets kicked out of Apple. He starts Next, and he buys Pixar from George Lucas. But then he hits a rough patch, and he's got this, financing issue. Katzenberg flies up, spends time with Steve Jobs, says, I'll buy Pixar. Jobs says, absolutely not. And then Katzenberg proposes a deal, and he's like, how about a 3-picture deal? Jobs says, okay. He flies back, and apparently all the animators were up in arms because they're like, hold on a second. Steve Jobs is going to use these Next computers to animate this movie, which ultimately became, I think, Toy Story. And they're like, this is going to put all of us out of a job. That perfect argument. And people were really upset. Roy Disney was upset. All the animators were upset. And they all went to Mike Eisner. And they were like, Michael, you need to fire Katzenberg. And they had a deal which was like, look, man, you
Misleading. Pixar half is true. In February 1986, Jobs paid $5 to George Lucas for technology rights plus $5 as capital. But Jobs did not buy Next. He founded it in 1985 with 5 Apple colleagues he took with him. The rough patch is real. Pixar lost money until Toy Story 1995. Jobs poured in roughly $50 of his own money. The clean version makes Jobs look like a serial acquirer. The truth is messier, a decade of failure before redemption.
Together, I feel like a crazy person, so I ignore myself.
Right.
But I wonder, like, why did this happen? Like yesterday, I was at a dinner in LA before I came to see you. And I told this very interesting story. Well, or I thought it was interesting at the time. You know that, like, so in 2000, right? If you think of, like, what happened in tech since 2000, so the last 26 years, people can give you all kinds of, like, fancy theories. But there's just, like, this weird word that's been at the center of every single technological revolution for the last 30 years, and that word is attention. Let me explain this to you. Google, they invent Google. What is Google? Google is an algorithm. It's called PageRank. But if you look inside of it, what is it? It says, well, Chamath's website has 5 links to it. Joe's website has 2 links. He's getting more attention. Okay? Chamath's website is more important. That's the sum total of Google. Now, they've made that a lot more refined, and they've done all these other fancy things. But it's all about attention.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to 2007, 8, 9, when, Zuck, and then when I went to work for Zuck, and we got on the scene, we're like, what does everybody care about? Attention. And so what is, like, the Facebook algorithm? What's the Instagram algorithm? How do we construct newsfeed?
True. Wow. The frame is real and well documented. Larry Page and Sergey Brin developed PageRank at Stanford in 1996, ranking pages by who linked to them. Facebook launched its newsfeed on September 5, 2006, the first major engagement-optimized social feed. The attention economy itself was named by Nobel laureate Herbert Simon in 1971 and popularized by Tim Wu's 2016 book, The Attention Merchants. AI is the next layer, compressing time to click further. So how did Chamath do? Across his 7 claims, 3 checked out as true. 2 were partially true, 1 was misleading, and 1 was flat-out false. The big themes. A. I replacing Jobs. The US-China AI race. Musk's wealth concentration were directionally accurate, but specific numbers, especially around tax burdens and federal waste, were exaggerated. The lesson: don't take pundits at their word. Check the data.